March 27, 1945. Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force. Eisenhower stands staring at a situation map that simply doesn't make any logical sense. Patton's Third Army was meant to be pushing forward along a single axis, heading toward Frankfurt. Instead, situation reports are flooding in from 5 completely different sectors, each one claiming active Third Army operations are underway, each one describing major engagements taking place. Frankfurt, Kassel, Wiesbaden, Gießen, Fulda. Gießen. 5 separate offensive operations launched within just 72 hours, spreading across a front that's over 100 miles wide. Eisenhower turns to face his operations officer and poses a question that will resonate through military history for decades to come. Where the hell is Patton actually fighting? The answer turns out to be simple. Everywhere. And any hope of coordination had already become completely impossible. The situation map at Supreme Headquarters gets updated twice each day based on Field Command reports. On March 24th, it clearly depicts Third Army's main effort, a concentrated push driving northeast from the Rhine bridgehead toward Frankfurt, with secondary operations providing support on the flanks. The front line appears as a coherent curve. The map looks clean, understandable, and according to every single report reaching Chef, entirely accurate. March 25th, 0600 hours. The first confusing reports arrive not from Third Army Headquarters itself, but from the adjacent First Army, reporting contact with Third Army elements near Marburg, a full 40 miles north of where Third Army's right flank is supposed to be positioned. By 1,000 hours, that initial trickle transforms into a flood. 12th Corps reports lead elements entering Hanau. 20th Corps reports active fighting in Wiesbaden. 8th Corps reports seizing a bridge near Kassel, 60 miles north of Frankfurt. Each report gets logged, plotted carefully on the map, and verified through proper channels. The map at Schaef begins to look increasingly strange. Instead of displaying a single advancing front, Third Army appears to be attacking in multiple directions simultaneously. Eisenhower's operations staff requests immediate clarification from Third Army Headquarters. The response takes a full 4 hours to arrive and is almost comically brief when it does. Third Army is exploiting opportunities as they develop. Current operations include Frankfurt, Kassel, Fulda, Gießen, and Wiesbaden. Further updates to follow. No detail whatsoever on force allocation. No explanation of how these widely dispersed operations support each other. No indication of which axis actually represents the main effort. The chief intelligence officer delivers an assessment that perfectly captures the confusion everyone's feeling. Quote 1. Dispersing strength across 5 different axes means none of them has overwhelming superiority at any point. It exposes vulnerable flanks. It strains supply lines to their limits. And yet, remarkably, the operations are succeeding. Reports keep arriving describing German positions falling, bridges being captured, towns being liberated. Third Army is winning everywhere simultaneously, and Schaef cannot explain how this is possible. The maps being used by different headquarters tell completely different stories. Third Army's internal maps show aggressive exploitation, updated constantly from incoming radio traffic. Chef's maps, updated only twice daily, lag hours behind the actual reality. First Army's maps show Third Army encroaching into their operational area. 7th Army sees the exact same thing happening from the south. German reconnaissance aircraft provide photographs showing American armor in locations that don't correspond to any coherent operational scheme whatsoever. By evening, Eisenhower convenes an emergency conference. His logistics officer reports that supply demands from Third Army have increased by 40% in just 24 hours, coming from widely dispersed locations. His communications officer reports radio traffic has tripled in volume, with multiple forward headquarters all requesting priority transmission simultaneously. His intelligence officer reports German intercepts show complete confusion, with German units reporting attacks coming from multiple directions at once. The consensus emerges. Third Army has transitioned from a planned advance into something much closer to organized chaos. But here's the thing. It's chaos that's actually working. Every single one of the 5 fronts is making measurable progress. German resistance is collapsing, not because it's being overwhelmed at any single point, but because it's being pulled apart by attacks from multiple directions simultaneously. The critical question becomes whether to rein Patton in or let the chaos continue unchecked. The five fronts emerge not from careful planning, but from opportunistic exploitation by commanders who see openings and attack without waiting for approval from higher command. This decentralized decision-making is both Patton's greatest strength and Schaaf's coordination nightmare. The Frankfurt front represents the planned main effort, but even here the operation diverges from the plan. 12th Corps is supposed to approach from the west in a deliberate, methodical advance. Instead, 4th Armored Division identifies a gap south of the city, punches straight through it, and begins an encirclement from the east. The division commander doesn't request permission beforehand. He sees the opportunity, takes it immediately, and reports afterward. By the time Corps headquarters actually understands what's happening, the division is fully committed, and Frankfurt is being attacked from two completely different directions. The Kassel front develops almost accidentally, without any planning. 8th Corps is advancing northeast when a reconnaissance patrol discovers a bridge over the Fulda River still intact. The patrol commander, just a captain, makes a decision that should rightfully be made by a general. He calls for reinforcements and seizes the bridge on his own initiative. Within hours, an entire combat command is across the river and driving hard toward Kassel, a city that wasn't even on 3rd Army's original objective list. By the time higher command learns about what's happening, American forces are already fighting in Kassel's outskirts. Canceling the operation means withdrawing under fire and losing the bridge they just captured. The decision is made to continue the attack. The Gießen front emerges when 6th Armored Division, tasked with protecting 12th Corps' flank, encounters weaker resistance than expected and decides to attack rather than simply defend their position. The division commander informs Corps headquarters, but doesn't wait for approval to proceed. He advances rapidly, overruns a German supply depot outside Gießen, and finds himself perfectly positioned to attack the city itself. He attacks and captures it in a day-long battle. Schaaf learns about it when a radio message arrives. Gießen secured, requesting immediate resupply and orders. The Wiesbaden operation begins as a feint, a deception. 20th Corps is supposed to threaten the city to draw German reserves away from Frankfurt. The feint becomes real when the corps commander realizes the defenses are much thinner than initial estimates suggested. He commits additional forces, turns the demonstration into a genuine assault, and by March 26th is fighting for control of the city. This frustrates Schaaf planners immensely because it diverts critical resources from Frankfurt. But the Corps commander argues Wiesbaden is falling faster than expected, and the opportunity is simply too valuable to ignore. The 5th Front near Fulda develops when 11th Armored Division, while pursuing retreating Germans, suddenly finds itself 50 miles beyond where it should be, and positioned to capture an intact rail junction. The division commander chooses to attack rather than pull back to his assigned position. The result is a rapid advance that captures Fulda on March 27th, but leaves the division operating in complete isolation, dependent on air resupply, with both flanks dangerously exposed. Each individual operation makes perfect tactical sense in isolation, but from Schaaf's perspective, it's an operational nightmare. Resources that were allocated for a single main effort are now being demanded by 5 separate operations. Air support requests come flooding in from dispersed locations. Artillery support has to be split between multiple axes. Reinforcements are needed simultaneously in 5 different cities. The logistics system, designed for a concentrated advance, struggles desperately to supply operations spread across a 100-mile frontage. SHAEF's greatest frustration is the impossibility of prioritizing which front gets first call on supplies, which gets priority for air support. In conventional operations with a clear main effort, these decisions are straightforward and simple. When 5 fronts are all active simultaneously, all making progress, all claiming critical importance, allocation becomes a nightmare of competing demands and priorities. The third crisis is a complete breakdown of communications. 3rd Army's radio networks, designed for a concentrated operational area, are overwhelmed by the sheer volume of traffic from dispersed units. On March 26th, the 3rd Army signal officer reports radio traffic has exceeded network capacity. Every forward headquarters is transmitting situation reports constantly. Logistical requests, intelligence updates, requests for orders. The traffic is so heavy that messages are delayed, sometimes for hours. Priority designations have lost all meaning because every headquarters marks every single message as priority. Genuinely urgent communications, a unit requesting immediate fire support, a breakthrough requiring exploitation, are delayed alongside routine administrative traffic. The problem cascades upward through the entire chain of command. SHAEF's communications with Third Army, normally routed through a single headquarters, are now routed to multiple forward commands. When SHAEF queries about Kassel, 8th Corps responds. When they ask about Frankfurt, 12th Corps responds. When they request an overall assessment, they receive 5 separate reports from 5 different headquarters, each describing their local situation without any reference to the larger picture. Assembling these fragments into a coherent understanding takes hours of work and produces results that are already outdated by the time they're compiled. Lateral coordination between Third Army units breaks down completely. 12th Corps and 20th Corps, operating at Frankfurt and Wiesbaden, should be coordinating their operations closely. In practice, both are so intensely focused on their immediate battles that coordination consists of hasty radio messages, just confirming boundaries. When 20th Corps breaks through at Wiesbaden and wheels northeast, the maneuver threatens to cut across 12th Corps' supply routes. The conflict is discovered not through proper planning, but when a supply column nearly collides head-on with a combat formation. A brief firefight between American units is avoided only because a junior officer recognizes the vehicles just in time. The communications overload affects German responses too. German intercept stations monitoring Allied communications receive so much Third Army traffic that their analysts simply cannot process it all. German intelligence reports describe American operations as chaotic and possibly confused, leading their commanders to hope the offensive is losing cohesion and falling apart. This complete misreading of the situation causes Germans to hold positions they should abandon immediately and commit reserves piecemeal instead of concentrating their forces. By March 27th, SHAEF implements emergency measures. Third Army is directed to consolidate reports, limit radio traffic to absolutely essential matters, and route all SHAEF communications through a single headquarters. Patton acknowledges the directive and largely ignores it. His commanders are engaged in active operations right now. Reducing communications means fighting blind. Official communications become more streamlined on paper, but actual operational traffic continues at the same overwhelming volume. The human cost appears tragically when units in distress cannot get the help they desperately need. A company from 6th Armored advancing toward Gießen encounters heavy resistance and requests artillery support urgently. The request enters the queue behind dozens of other messages. By the time it's actually processed and fire support is dispatched, the company has already withdrawn with casualties that might have been avoided with faster response. The commander's report notes bitterly that he could see American artillery just 2 miles away but couldn't get them to fire because the entire system was completely saturated. The fourth crisis is logistical collapse threatening the entire offensive. Third Army's supply system is designed around a main supply route feeding a concentrated operational area. When that area fractures into 5 dispersed fronts, the system simply cannot adapt quickly enough. Fuel becomes the immediate problem. Armored divisions consume enormous quantities. A single division advancing at high speed burns through 50,000 gallons daily. When divisions were concentrated, fuel trucks made reliable runs along established routes. With 5 fronts spread out, demand is scattered across 100 miles. Routes are longer and more vulnerable to interdiction. Trucks burn fuel just reaching the units that need it. By March 27th, multiple units report critical fuel shortages. 4th Armored at Frankfurt has fuel for just 6 more hours of operations. 11th Armored at Fulda is down to a quarter tank. 8th Corps near Kassel is rationing fuel strictly, prioritizing combat vehicles over support units. Emergency deliveries are organized hastily, but they require diverting trucks from other critical missions, creating shortages elsewhere in the system. The system begins cannibalizing itself, falling further behind every single hour. Ammunition resupply faces similar challenges and constraints. Artillery supporting Frankfurt fires thousands of rounds daily. When stocks run dangerously low, convoys are dispatched immediately. But those same convoys are desperately needed at Kassel, Gießen, Wiesbaden, and Fulda. SHAEF directs that Frankfurt receives priority. This means artillery at Kassel and Fulda must reduce their fire rates significantly, slowing operations and increasing infantry casualties. Food, medical supplies, and replacement parts face the same allocation nightmare. Medical evacuation becomes particularly problematic and deadly. Wounded at Fulda, 50 miles from the nearest hospital, face much longer evacuation times than wounded at Frankfurt. The result is entirely predictable. Higher mortality rates among forward units farthest from support, a disparity having nothing to do with combat severity and everything to do with logistics. Third Army's logistics officer presents his assessment on March 28th. Current tempo is completely unsustainable. Supply consumption exceeds delivery capacity by 30%. Some units are operating on emergency reserves. If the five-front offensive continues at this pace, multiple units will run out of critical supplies within 48 hours. Recommendation: consolidate operations. Designate a clear main effort. Concentrate logistics accordingly. Patton's response is characteristically aggressive. _4_. He accepts the logistical risk rather than slow down the offensive momentum. The gamble works, but just barely. Units do manage to capture German supply stocks and use them. Commanders improvise creatively, swapping fuel and ammunition between units, rationing strictly, accepting higher operational risk. But the improvisation masks a reality Chef cannot ignore. Third Army is operating well beyond the limits of its logistical system, sustained by captured supplies and a willingness to accept what should be unacceptable risk. March 29th, Chef holds a major conference to review operations and chart the next phase. The conference reveals a fundamental shift in how the war is being fought. For the first time, Allied Command is not planning the next operation in advance. It's reacting to operations already underway, trying to support them after the fact, rather than directing the advance. Eisenhower opens the conference acknowledging the obvious reality everyone can see. Patton's five-front offensive has succeeded beyond any reasonable expectation. Frankfurt is falling. Kassel is under our control. Gießen, Wiesbaden, Fulda all captured. German defenses across central Germany are collapsing completely. Third Army has advanced over 70 miles in less than a week. By any measure, this is a spectacular victory. But Eisenhower notes the offensive has created a situation Schaff simply cannot control. Third Army operates across such a broad front with such dispersed objectives that coordinating with adjacent armies has become impossible. First Army no longer has clear boundaries with us. Seventh Army encounters Third Army units in what should be their operational area. The neat division of the front into distinct sectors has completely broken down. The front is no longer a line. It's a zone of American penetration with unclear boundaries. The intelligence officer presents an assessment revealing the enemy's parallel confusion. Quote 7. But the officer notes this mirrors Allied confusion perfectly. Quote 8. The logistics briefing is absolutely sobering. Quote 9. Eisenhower faces a decision that perfectly encapsulates the paradox he's confronting. Third Army has proven that aggressive, dispersed operations shatter enemy defenses faster than methodical advances ever could. But those same operations strain command, communications, and logistics to the breaking point. Continuing means accepting that SHAEF will react rather than direct operations. Coordination will be minimal at best, logistical risk substantial. The alternative is to slow Third Army down, restore proper order, and resume conventional operations. Eisenhower decides to let the offensive continue, but fundamentally shifts SHAEF's role from direction to support. Quote 10. It's an admission that operational tempo has exceeded the capacity of centralized command to control effectively. This moment marks a fundamental change in how the war is being fought. For 2 full years, Allied operations followed a clear pattern. SHAEF planned, armies executed those plans. Progress was methodical and controlled. The five-front offensive breaks that pattern completely. Third Army no longer executes SHAEF's plan. SHAEF supports Third Army's initiative. The front is no longer a coherent line advancing on a schedule. It's a fluid zone where American forces appear wherever enemy defenses are weakest. Operations begin without formal authorization. Success is measured by enemy capabilities destroyed, not terrain captured. For the Germans, the offensive is absolutely catastrophic. Not primarily because of casualties or territory lost, but because it makes defensive planning completely impossible. German commanders cannot concentrate forces against 5 dispersed threats simultaneously. They cannot predict where the next attacks will come from. They cannot establish defensive lines because Americans are already behind them before they can dig in. The result is not a fighting withdrawal, but a collapse into fragmented resistance by isolated units that have lost contact with higher command. The war continues for 6 more weeks. But the character of the fighting has changed irreversibly. Allied advances are no longer measured in careful phase lines marked on maps. They're measured in exploitation drives that continue until units literally run out of fuel. German defenses are no longer coherent fronts with prepared positions. They're ad hoc groupings contesting key terrain wherever they can. Allied command no longer directs a systematic campaign according to plan. It's trying desperately to keep pace with commanders who see opportunities and exploit them without waiting for permission. The front that Eisenhower tried to control no longer exists. In its place is something far more chaotic, far more effective, and fundamentally impossible to manage from a headquarters 100 miles away from the fighting. Patton's 5 fronts didn't just defeat the German army in central Germany. They defeated the entire concept of centralized operational control, forcing Allied command to choose between restraining success or accepting chaos. They chose chaos, and chaos won the war.